the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello once again to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, and we are continuing our NFC team-by-team previews here. We are in the middle of the NFC South, and we are talking about the New Orleans Saints. But before we dive right in, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you do not miss out on the latest content here on the Vipers Network. Now, speaking of this Saints team, last year, 7-10. Meanwhile, their points for was 330. Their points against was 345. That was a negative 15 as far as points for and points against differential is concerned. When you look at their passing offense, they ranked 16th in the league with 217.2 yards per game passing, and that is with Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston under center for most of the season. Their run offense was 19th in the league, averaging 116.6 yards per contest, while their passing defense was amongst the best in the league, allowing just 184.4 passing yards per game against, while the run defense was 24th in the league, allowing 130.5 per game. New Orleans started off the season with a win against the Atlanta Falcons down in Atlanta, but after that, they would end up losing 9 of their next contests before closing out the season with wins in their 3 of their final 4 contests, which was at that time a little too late, even in that NFC South. New Orleans needed to find some stability at the quarterback position ahead of the 2023 season there after experimenting with Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, and Andy Dalton, not to mention Trevor Siemen, Ian Book in the last couple seasons. Now, luckily for them, a Pro Bowl quarterback just suddenly appeared out of nowhere and became available. More to come on that a little bit later. Now, New Orleans will hope that they can keep their offense healthy and on the field in 2023. Now, when we look at the camp battles that are taking place there in New Orleans, all eyes should be fixated there on the running back position, because right there, we don't know what we're going to get. Is it going to be Alvin Kamara, who's possibly going to miss time due to suspension this season? Is it going to be Jamal Williams, who had a 17-touchdown year with the Detroit Lions just a season ago? Or will it be the rookie there, Kendre Miller, who steps up, a guy who can run the ball and catch the ball out of the backfield? If Alvin Kamara is going to miss significant time, look for this backfield to more than likely be split there, with Jamal Williams getting a good run on the ground. Meanwhile, Kendre Miller is going to be that pass catching back. Alvin Kamara literally is all these backs rolled into one. And when we talk to Derek Carr there throughout the offseason, Alvin Kamara is one of those backs he's going to love to work with, because he is going to be able to catch those passes short 2-3 yards and take it to the house whenever necessary. When we look at the Saints, as far as the draft is concerned, in the first round, they went defensive tackle with Bryce Breesy there out of Clemson. One of those guys that kind of plugs up the middle after you've seen that run defense kind of take a step back in 2022. They also look to address the edge position there with second round selection, Isaiah Foskey. That's going to be one of those guys that kind of helps kind of ease up the loss when it comes to Marcus Davenport's departure. Now, next up, we talked about Kendre Miller. He was the third round selection there, pick number 71. Nick Saldiveri, offensive tackle. He went in the 4th round. Well, they also used a 4th round selection with quarterback Jake Haener there out of Fresno State. And listen, he's more than just a quarterback. He's like a glamour model to boot. Then the 6th round, one of my favorite selections of the NFL draft, at pick number 195, Wake Forest wide receiver A.T. Perry. Perry is one of the few actual ex-receivers that was available in this draft. Looking at what the Saints did this offseason via free agency, no other move was bigger than Derek Carr coming over there. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. They also went out there and they signed Jamal Williams, knowing that the running back position was a little unstable prior to the draft. New Orleans also addressed the defensive tackle position there with the signings of Kalen Sanders and Nathan Shepard. The signing of Storm Norton also adds a little bit of offensive tackle depth there for the Saints team. And safety Jonathan Abram, he comes over, hopefully be kind of that hard-hitting presence, maybe live up to expectations that he never met there as a Raider. The Saints also had several losses along the way there, including edge defender Marcus Davenport, quarterback Andy Dalton, defensive tackles David Onyemata and Shai Tuttle, as well as defenders Caden Ellis, Justin Evans, and wide receivers Marquez Callaway and Deontay Hardy. Now, the best move this whole offseason, when a team is searching for a quarterback and a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback falls into your laps, that is a win right there. In fact, only 4 NFC quarterbacks threw for more yards than what Derek Carr had done last season, and he was benched. He was benched for the last 2 games of the Raiders season, or else he would have had even more yardage. So when you look at best moves, that is arguably the best move. The Saints were literally 1 quarterback away from making the postseason. Now, the worst move, New Orleans lost both David Onyemata there, and Caden Ellis to their division rivals in Atlanta. Both were instrumental parts of the Saints defense in 2022. The loss of Ellis means that the Saints, they're going to need to find someone to replace the 7 sacks and the 78 total tackles that Ellis is bringing with him to the Atlanta Falcons organization. So you have to consider the loss of Ellis, their main sack guy from a season ago outside of Cameron Jordan, a huge loss for this team. And I don't know if there's anyone ready to step up into that role right now. Maybe OTAs will give us a better sign of something down the road. So what do the Saints need to do here in 2023? After finishing last season at 7-10, I am expecting a reversal of fortunes here as in 2023. I'm projecting the Saints to finish at 10-7. Derek Carr brings stability, and he has some good weapons in this offense. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Jawan Johnson, Raheed Shaheed there, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, and we're not even talking about Alvin Kamara yet, who's going to miss some time. When Kamara comes back, say he misses 6 games or whatever that number looks like, he's going to come in there and he's automatically going to come into with league-winning type upside. So Derek Carr, in fact, as far as fantasy is concerned, his value could even jump even higher than what it's currently being at. We know that Carr is impressed with Kamara's route running ability. That is something that he's never really had an opportunity to work with. Yes, Josh Jacobs was able to catch some passes, but not at the level of Alvin Kamara. Now, for Kamara, we are still waiting to hear how that legal situation unravels here, and hopefully we have a little bit more clarity before week number 1 as we get deeper and deeper in training camp. The sooner, the better, right? I mean, I'm not stepping on a line here at all. Now, fantasy managers are going to have to keep a keen eye on that whole situation all offseason. If you're doing drafts right now, I mean, I don't know if you can spend a draft pick any earlier than the 8th round on Alvin Kamara based on that uncertainty. Even right there, we just gave you a little bit of a glimpse into the fantasy implications of this New Orleans Saints team. So let's talk about the top 5 fantasy assets for the Saints heading into 2023. Number 1, it's Chris Olave. You cannot guard Olave one-on-one. He literally had a success rate versus man coverage over 75% last season, and he was 3rd in air yards at 40.8%, 10th in yards per route run at 2.57, and 12th in route win rate at 48.1%. Derek Carr is going to love everything about Chris Olave, and Chris Olave, he's going to appreciate Derek Carr. Now, number 2 is Derek Carr, and Carr and Olave, this connection, it is going to be special. Carr, he has other weapons in this offense. We talked about Thomas. We talked about Shaheed. We've talked about Kamara and Jamal Williams. He's basically replacing Darren Waller with Jawan Johnson, who's just a big old beast of a man there, another freak athlete there at the tight end position. I don't think I'm stepping too far out of line when I'm saying that Derek Carr and Chris Olave could be one of the top 5 quarterback wide receiver connections in fantasy in 2023. At number 3 is Michael Thomas. Stop if you've heard this before, but Michael Thomas is expected to be ready for the start of the 2023 season, which means we need to start getting Michael Thomas back on our radar. I don't know how long that's going to last because his injury history kind of makes us a little bit hesitant about where we select him when it comes to drafting. But Thomas averaged 17 fantasy points per game, which was good enough to be wide receiver 9 when he was healthy. Over that small 3-game sample size, Thomas drew a 19.6% target share while earning a 33% end zone share, which all led to 16 receptions and 3 touchdowns. At number 4, we have the need for Shaheed here. On 186 routes run last season, Shaheed averaged 2.58 yards per route run. In the final 7 games of the 2022 season, Shaheed would record 3 top 36 wide receiver finishes in fantasy. We know Michael Thomas's history when it comes to staying on the field. If Thomas misses any time, Shaheed is more than capable of producing. And number 5, Alvin Kamara. We know that the legal issues are not quite resolved yet, and a suspension is likely to come. But at running back 34, according to ADP, and coming off the board with pick number 106, this is almost like a risk versus reward type value play here. If you can grab Kamara late in drafts, it's going to pay huge dividends later on the season, especially when you hit those fantasy playoffs. We know in the meantime that Kendre Miller, who missed OTAs kind of recovering from that MCL injury, will handle most of the receiving duties, while Jamal Williams is more than capable of handling the duties on the ground there in Kamara's absence. But of all those players listed there, there's only one player that you have to add for fantasy, and it is easily Chris Olave. Derek Carr can throw 10 corner routes per game, and Olave is going to score, not just catch. He's going to score on at least 2 of them. He's not only the top fantasy asset for the New Orleans Saints, he's one of the top fantasy assets altogether in all of fantasy football. Carr and Olave are going to get more out of one another this season than they've ever gotten out of themselves at any point of their careers. Carr has supported great seasons from Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, and even Michael Crabtree if we're looking at the past. And clearly, Carr is the best quarterback that Olave has played with in the National Football League. Watching OTAs, there is a chemistry between these two, and it's very clear that this is going to be one of the most impactful duos in the league. Now, the biggest bust for the Saints, he could also be one of the biggest values, and that is right now going to be Alvin Kamara. New Orleans added plenty of insurance this offseason, adding that pass catching back there in Kendrick Miller, as well as that ground and pounder Jamal Williams. I would expect Kamara to face at least a 6-game suspension. That's kind of what we're hearing right now, but really no one knows as of yet. I don't even know if it's going to be before the season, in the middle of the season, or even at the end of the season. How do you prepare to lose something before you even know that it is lost? Now, the best fantasy value that the Saints can give you, I can't trust Michael Thomas to play 15-plus games. I just can't. I can't even project that he hits over 5 games this season. With that in mind, the best value on the Saints could be considered a sleeper, and that is Rashid Shaheed there with an ADP of 188. Wide receiver 71. Shaheed is more than just speed. He's more than just a field stretcher. And he's really just a Michael Thomas injury away from being a huge fantasy producer. Add to all that Derek Carr's career. The guy's basically averaging 7.5 yards per attempt with a 67% completion percentage over the last 4 years. Shaheed now has a trigger man that's going to be able to get him involved in the game when the time comes. He was 5th amongst all wide receivers last season when it came to that yards per route run. It's 2.79. So look out in 2023 for Rashid Shaheed. And finally, the fantasy sleeper. Now, Shaheed, he could have been this fantasy sleeper, and nobody would blink an eye, but I'm going with Juwan Johnson, who's coming off a top 10 fantasy tight end season and is currently be selected as the tight end 17 according to ADP. How do you have a top 10 season and slide down to tight end 17? Carr, we know that he has a history of targeting his tight ends. He loves to spread the ball around. 2 seasons ago, both Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller had over 90 targets. Now, Johnson, he's not likely to get 90 targets, especially if Michael Thomas happens to remain healthy, but he should see more than the 65 that he saw a season ago. So you have to expect, if Johnson is getting more opportunities, that his fantasy value should be increasing and not decreasing. It makes no sense. The ADP here makes no sense. But as you can see from a fantasy perspective, there is so much talent in this Saints offense that needs to be considered when heading into your 2023 drafts. Before walking away from your fantasy drafts, you got to make sure that you land yourself a New Orleans Saint. When you do, you can thank me a little bit later.